Hello there. Today I've got a pretty extensive topic to cover, and that's DoT damage. A lot of this stuff behaves abnormally and/or isn't reflected in the numbers of the mod descriptions, so this has taken a lot of manual testing and math. As a bonus, Gunfire just released a patch that affects some of the items I'll discuss today, but after reading the patch notes and doing a quick retest, my overall results still seem consistent. There are bound to be mistakes in a video this information heavy though, so I'll try to point out anything I discover is inaccurate in a pinned comment. So now that I've done my preamble, let's get into it because there's a lot to discuss, starting with damage increases that affect all dots. These are all damage, status damage, and elemental damage for burn, corroded, and overloaded. I'm going to refer to these damage increases collectively as the universal DoT increases to avoid having to list them out every time. And that leads us nicely into the first group of dots I want to lump together, which are innate weapon dots, mutator dots, and dots from other items like a detonation trigger. These benefit from the universal DoT increases, all stacking additively and nothing else. This part is pretty simple and there isn't much to discuss here, but this group of dots highlights a key problem with focusing on dots for damage, which is that they're lacking in ways to scale up their output. Status effects can't crit, and only the Vile Prime perk provides a multiplicative damage increase. And with so few stats actually affecting DoT damage, it might seem like it's impossible to push their damage to satisfactory levels. Mods are where things get complicated, but also more exciting. Some mods behave like the dots I just mentioned, only benefiting from the universal DoT increases, while others scale off of mod damage, and they do so multiplicatively. To make things even more confusing, some dots that scale with mod damage don't reflect this damage increase in their description or have other inaccuracies, so I had to individually test each one. This distinction between dots that scale with mod damage and ones that don't is a huge deal though, since it adds a whole extra stat we can use to boost DoT damage, with the boost being multiplicative as the cherry on top. So without further ado, let's go through them all, and I'll stop to mention noteworthy bugs or quirks of specific DoT sources. Starting with the unique mods, Aphelion and Corrupted Aphelion's Supernova and Micronova mods apply burning, but neither of these dots scale with mod damage. Bloodshot from Corrupted Merciless is our first example of inaccurate descriptions. In-game, it reads as 250 bleed damage, which is bugged in multiple ways. So first, its base damage is 750 at max level, so the description isn't taking the 3 times damage increase from weapon level into account. Additionally, this value doesn't update with any damage increases, even ones that actually do increase its damage. And Bloodshot does not benefit from mod damage, so this is only the universal DoT increases anyway. Savior's Shatterstar is our first example of a mods scaling DoT, applying mod damage multiplicatively to the universal DoT increases. Although it doesn't apply your mod's damage to the weapon shots like the similar empowered bullet mods, its DoT does have a 25% higher base damage over Hotshot, which does make a significant difference when building for dots. For the unique handgun mods, let's start with everyone's favorite weapon, Nebula, and its corrupted sibling. Neither of these has a mod scaling DoT, and both of them are horribly bugged. So the DoT from Nebula's Nano-Swarm is probably the most bugged DoT in the game. It's showing over 4 times the expected damage per tick, but when I tried to gauge the total damage with Energized Neck Coil, it seemed to be accurate to the description. Furthermore, the tick damage scales with status duration, although I don't think it's using it as a flat multiplier, so honestly, I don't know what to make of it. Corrupted Nebula's Nano Phase is also bugged, but in a sadder way. Its mod dot is not scaling with weapon level, even though the description says it does, so the damage is only a third of what it reads. And neither of these dots scale with mod damage, so we can't scale them any higher anyways. Big Bang from Starshot does have multiplicative mod scaling on its dot, and aside from this not being reflected in the description, there's no weird behavior here. It's just a gigantic dot that has the highest damage potential in the game at max stacks because of its high 1350 base damage and access to mod scaling. Explosive Shot from Hellfire is competing with Nano-Swarm for being the weirdest dot in the game. While it doesn't have access to mod scaling on the dot, it does double dip direct all damage buffs, and we can use that to scale the dot up quite high. I'll have an explanation of what I mean by this direct all damage buff in the pinned comment because it's too much to explain here, but I just wanted to highlight that if you build around this interaction, Hellfire's mod is one of the strongest dot sources in the game, which is pretty great to say because it's always lagged behind the other elemental handguns. So now on to the slottable mods that apply dots. Most of these are pretty simple, and we can blow through them pretty quickly. So mods like Blood Draw, Scrap Shot, Blood Draw, Scrap Shot, and Flying Bomb Trap all apply dots that do not scale with mod damage, so only the universal dot increases, although Scrap Shot's exceptionally high base damage of 1200 is worth mentioning. The dots from Voltaic Rondure, Witchfire, and the Elemental Bullet mods, including the new abrasive rounds, these all do have mod damage scaling on the dot, but they have lacking base damage and generally can't compete with the best options when it comes to focusing on dot damage, although elemental bullets do have the benefit of applying your mod damage to your gun additively. So the first slottable mod worth discussing is Heatwave, and it actually doesn't have any special scaling properties and only benefits from the universal dot increases. But what makes it notable is its exceptionally high DPS. 750 base damage is the same total damage as Savior's Shatterstar, but Heatwave's burn deals its damage in half the time, 5 seconds instead of 10. So that means its DPS is twice as high. Even without access to mod scaling or any funny business, Heatwave's dot still competes at the top of the table, and if you aren't building to maximize specific mod scaling dots, Heatwave will almost certainly be the highest DPS dot available. The second slottable mod dot worth discussing is Fargazer. Its madness dot isn't a traditional status effect, and it does have mod damage scaling, but it uses mod damage additively to the universal dot increases instead of multiplicatively like everything else where mod damage applies. The DPS is still quite strong since you can stack it up 10 times, although you need to keep aiming down sights at the target to keep the stacks on. Madness is also unaffected by status duration. So finally, we're here, we reached it, the big boy, everyone's favorite mod to make clickbait builds about, it's Firestorm. So as you probably guessed, Firestorm has access to multiplicative dot scaling with mod damage, and its burning value isn't displayed in the description, but I can tell you that it deals a base of 900 damage over 10 seconds, making it above average in terms of total damage and DPS. The only dots that beat it out in terms of total damage and DPS are Scrapshot, Supernova, Heatwave, and a fully charged Big Bang. Scrapshot and Supernova don't have access to mod damage scaling on their dots, so they quickly get outpaced by Firestorm, and Big Bang is far less spammable. Heatwave's exceptional base values still allow it to compete dot-wise, but it doesn't do anything besides apply the dot, while Firestorm is summoning a damaging tornado. The tornado can also stick to enemies and basically functions as a second dot that also benefits from mod damage, so you can just think of Firestorm like a fire and forget nuclear dot. So in summary, dots are weird. Innate dots, mutator dots, and item dots only benefit from the universal dot increases, but for mods that apply dots, whether they benefit from mod damage or not varies on a case-to-case basis, applying it multiplicatively to the universal dot increases if they do. Some mod dots also have some strange bugs or damage calculations, making things even more inconsistent. So that was a lot, but we just covered every dot in the game and their scaling potential. As a reward for sticking around for my entire lecture, here's a optimized degenerate Firestorm spam build. No build explanation here because Energized Neck Coil is its own rabbit hole of insanity that I'll cover separately, so take this as a preview of what's to come. You've got permanent Death Wish thanks to Spellweaver, so just keep your buffs up, shoot your mods, and run in circles while Firestorm does its work. Enjoy, and I hope this was informative.